Dear friends, I welcome you to my channel. I am Taras Berezovets. Today we will discuss the so-called revenge of Kadyrov. He stated today that allegedly the geranium's drones, as a result of a repeated attack, hit the building of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in Kiev, and naturally all targets were hit. As the Kremlin propaganda loves to lie, all targets were achieved, about which they tell. While jumping ahead, I will say that this information is confirmed. Zelensky accused the United States of leaking information regarding negotiations about providing Ukraine with Tomahawk cruise missiles. I remind you that the corresponding request came from the administration of President Zelensky the day before, as reported by the New York Times. Today, Zelensky confirmed that the relevant requests were made and expressed surprise that there are no secrets for third parties in the negotiations between the Ukrainian administration and the American administration. Meanwhile, North Korean mercenaries who are already on the territory of the Russian Federation are experiencing significant difficulties in understanding military commands from Russian officers. This is reported by the British publication Financial Times. North Korean military personnel cannot remember commands from Russian officers: return to positions, fire, launch. And this currently represents the largest difficulties in the adaptation of North Korean military personnel on the territory of the Russian Federation. Meanwhile, the US State Department has finally acknowledged, ultimately, the presence of North Korean military personnel and their training on the territory of Russia is a direct violation of a UN Security Council resolution. I mentioned this 2 days ago. Well, it seems the newspaper needed a bit more time to systematize this information and make its own conclusion. Meanwhile, sources from the Financial Times reported on alleged negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv regarding the possibility of refraining from strikes on energy facilities during the upcoming winter. To anticipate, this information has already been denied. Dmitry Peskov stated this in the Kremlin. Representatives of the Ukrainian authorities also do not comment on the information. As I predicted, the situation with the placement of North Korean mercenaries on the territory of the Russian Federation has become a trigger for the leadership of South Korea. South Korea's Yonhap agency reports that South Korean scouts and military personnel are likely already in Ukraine to coordinate actions to repel attacks from North Korean forces. Additionally, President Zelensky stated that Ukraine has received only about 10% of the aid that the US Congress voted for. Friends, we will discuss all of this further. So, let me remind you, the key news the day before was that for the first time, drones attacked the territory of the Chechen Republic, marking the first such incident since the beginning of the large-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. And while the leader of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, was in Bahrain with Azit, at least one drone attacked the Russian Special Forces University in Gudermes. I remind you that this university is named after the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. The day before, Kadyrov accused the Ukrainian side of this. However, he reported that there were no casualties as a result of the attack. Today, his version has already changed. He stated that as a result of a drone attack on the Special Forces University, allegedly, Ukrainian prisoners of war were killed. He stated that there are up to 10 Ukrainian prisoners of war at each strategic facility in the Republic, including on the territory. The Russian Special Forces University in Kiev, in trying to harm us today, destroyed its own soldiers. There are no confirmations of Kadyrov's words as of today. Also, speaking before Russian propagandists, he stated that he had ordered all Chechen formations acting against the Ukrainian army not to take prisoners. Thus, Kadyrov has already preemptively acknowledged himself as a war criminal since, according to the Geneva Convention, which Russia, by the way, has committed to uphold, there is a clear protocol outlined regarding the treatment of prisoners of war. And of course, their murders, torture, and other crimes against them are classified as the gravest war crimes with respect to the statute of limitations that they have. Well, for Kadyrov, the law is not written. He does not respect any laws, neither international nor even Russian, no matter how flawed they may be. But the public acknowledgement, he signed off on calling everyone to commit war crimes, actually changes very little. Prior to this, the Chechen units operating on the front lines mostly acted in the rear as reconnaissance detachments and had virtually no direct fire contact with Ukrainian units. Well, with rare exceptions, the initial phases of the 2022 invasion and then some individual ones, the battles and clashes that took place throughout the year 2023 were mainly in the Donetsk region, as is known according to numerous reports, including Russian military interceptions and radio intercepts. Kadyrov's forces fled and did not engage directly in combat with Ukrainian military units. Moreover, several of Kadyrov's men have surrendered. Kadyrov initially lied, claiming that there were no Chechens in captivity, and then he and his nuke Abtia Laudina eventually admitted that it turns out Kadyrov's men were captured. Indeed, they said that they do not deserve an exchange and that they should have committed suicide. Today, Kadyrov stated that allegedly, as an act of revenge, they attempted to strike for 2 days because a drone flew into Gudermes. By the way, there is still a big question of whether this drone was Ukrainian. Ukrainian sources in the intelligence services believe that this strike may have been carried out by Kadyrov's enemies in the North Caucasus. He has many internal enemies, particularly in neighboring Dagestan and Ingushetia, and it is quite possible that this drone was launched from their territory, which I also detailed in my blog the day before. I will repeat once more, we just need to sort this out. I think they had the opportunity to analyze the surviving remains of this drone in order to identify which model was ultimately launched. And it is quite possible that it turns out that this drone has a range that simply could not reach from the territory of Ukraine. And there, in a straight line with controlled Ukrainian, the territory controlled by the troops was over 1,000 kilometers. Therefore, it is still a big question. Could one drone overcome all Russian air defense systems and fly 1,000 kilometers? Well, if there had been an attack with 1530 drones, maybe it could have been believed. The only drone that calmly flew and struck the Russian Special Forces University in Gudermes, I will repeat, it would have been much easier to launch it from some border territories. However, the truth is not commented on here. Nevertheless, Kadyrov claims that an attack was allegedly carried out on the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine today. He stated that the strike was aimed at the control center of the drone systems of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in Kiev. Well, naturally, again, the tales about 9 Ukrainian nationalists being killed and 17 Ukrainian nationalists being wounded. I will repeat once again, there are no grounds to trust this information. As a matter of fact, there are no grounds confirming the very fact of an attack on the buildings of the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces in Kiev. This all seems like yet another disinformation campaign, I will repeat once again, which Kadyrov needed solely to justify himself for the fact that the day before, this very drone, I will repeat, of unknown origin, flew into the Special Forces University and somehow mystically appeared there, even though no one was killed there the day before. Today he claims that Ukrainian prisoners of war were killed there. Well, in a word, a lie is seasoned with another lie, and that lie ultimately drives everything. Meanwhile, Vladimir Zelensky stated that he indeed requested Tomahawk cruise missiles with a range of up to 2,500 kilometers from the United States and accused Washington of destroying this information. Quote, "You see what is happening in the media. They said that Ukraine wants or wanted to receive many missiles, such as those Agavki. But this was confidential information between Ukraine and the White House. How to interpret these messages means that there is nothing confidential between partners." Zelensky also stated that Ukraine has received only 10% of the military aid from the United States that was voted on by Congress to date. I remind you, this happened in the spring. And Western countries didn't provide promised defenses. In addition, Zelensky commented on the sending of North Korean mercenaries to participate in the war against Ukraine. And it was stated that Ukraine will not ask its allies to send their contingents because North Korea is now entering the war. Such conversations will only undermine support for Ukraine, Zelensky stated. I know how skeptically everyone regards this, very cautiously. And we have never promoted this idea. It is very dangerous when there is no such decision from leaders and from the public. It is very dangerous to raise this topic because it could lead to losing all other support, Zelensky emphasized. And Taras wrote the day before in the New York Times that the victory plan presented to the White House was met quite coolly. I also detailed this. Representatives of the American administration who spoke with a journalist from an American publication reported that Zelensky also requested a package of measures for non-nuclear deterrence. This package included the provision of cruise missiles TAMG, which, as we understand, the Biden administration has now refused to provide. However, this entire story may have a continuation. Following the US presidential elections, which will take place on November 5th, excerpts from the so-called peace plan of Donald Trump and his election partner, vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, have surfaced in the press. According to these excerpts, this information about Trump is allegedly not officially confirmed, but nevertheless, it is expected that supposedly the publication Ostry Journal writes that allegedly the Trump administration, in the event of coming to power, envisions the creation of a demilitarized zone on both sides and delineation along the front line. That is, according to the current situation, as it will be at the time of concluding this very peace agreement, Zelensky, while intensifying his criticism of the current administration of Joe Biden, clearly understands that a change in leadership will happen in the White House regardless. There was no response to the criticism of the unsympathetic Biden administration, especially from Kamala Harris's office. However, it is quite possible that representatives from Donald Trump's campaign will comment on this criticism. And it is quite possible that he does not miss a single opportunity to state that this war would certainly not have taken place under his leadership, and that fundamentally the Biden administration allowed this war to happen and did not provide effective support. In doing so, it sent a signal to Putin that he could proceed. Therefore, I will repeat once again, it is quite possible that this story will have further developments. Returning to the North Korean military personnel who are already on the territory of the Russian Federation, it concerns at least 3,000 soldiers, as reported by the British publication Financial Times, citing a representative of the South Korean National Intelligence Service. North Korean military personnel are only undergoing training, however. The scope of their application, whether they will be stormtroopers or perform the functions of rear units, is currently completely unclear. According to Ukrainian intelligence, at least 3,000 individuals are already in the Kursk region. The key problem is, as they say, lost in translation. There was a very good film, and there still is, a very good film with American actors telling the story of an American star and the wife of an American photographer. Scarlett Johansson stars in this film. It's a very good movie. Lost in translation. Well, that's approximately the translation. So, these so-called lost in translation turned out to be North Korean military personnel, as they cannot learn Russian military terms and commands, in particular the commands to return to positions, fire, and launch, as sources claim. In South Korean intelligence, North Korean soldiers understand nothing. According to radio intercepts, Russian officers also complain that for every group of 30 North Korean soldiers, that is, a platoon, a translator must be assigned, along with 3 Russian servicemen who accompany them. In addition, the Financial Times provides a detailed analysis of the motivations for them to fight, reporting that the average salary, the monthly salary of a soldier or worker in North Korea is $1 per month. Putin will pay Kim Jong-un's regime $2,000 for each mercenary, while the soldiers themselves will receive 5 to 10% of that amount. This means that the amount is approximately between $100 to $200 per month that they will receive. Thus, over the course of a year, they will be able to accumulate approximately between $1,200 to $2,400. $400,000 is a huge sum for the residents of North Korea. Moreover, many of these soldiers, primarily young soldiers, are reported by Ukrainian intelligence to be mostly young North Koreans under the age of 20. This means that many of them have not yet started their own families. They have parents there, but typically no wives or children. Therefore, they usually represent residents from the countryside, not from Pyongyang. As a bonus, the North Korean authorities may also offer them relocation to Pyongyang, which is known to be a closed city. Well, as we remember from the Soviet times, there was the so-called limit, meaning that it was impossible for residents of the provinces to simply move to Moscow, Leningrad, Kyiv, or other capitals of the then Union republics. This represents an unimaginable privilege, the opportunity to live in Pyongyang. In the capital of North Korea, the living standards are naturally much higher compared to the overall poverty that exists in the DPRK. Moreover, the Financial Times reports that soldiers of the North Korean army may also be offered additional benefits, such as free housing from the state or admission to university for them or their relatives. And so, representatives of South Korean intelligence and military have apparently already gone to Ukraine. We can see that the administration of the president of South Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol, is acting very actively. He spoke on the phone with President Zelensky on October 29th during a call. They plan to closely monitor the training process of North Korean military personnel, and therefore South Korea will primarily provide Ukraine with intelligence on how or which buttons to press, so to speak, to encourage them to desert. In addition, a methodological guide has already been developed, and the press has also reported on this. Ukrainian units have developed a guide specifically for North Korean soldiers on how they can safely desert and surrender to the Ukrainian army. South Korean intelligence is very interested in new defectors, as there has been no opportunity to escape from North Korea for a long time, and the pool of defectors has not been replenished for an extended period. Therefore, they are evidently interested in the fact that when the first North Korean soldiers are captured, there is no doubt that they will either surrender themselves or end up in the hands of South Korean counterintelligence. Well, there is currently no evidence that South Korea will provide military assistance to Ukraine. However, as you can understand, this information will not be publicly commented on, even if negotiations are already underway. I think we will not learn about them right away, at least not soon. So, these are our news, friends, for this evening. Thank you for watching this video. Take care of yourselves. Please subscribe to the channel, like, share, and comment on the broadcast. Don't forget to recommend the video to friends and acquaintances. Thanks to all partners, sponsors, and friends of the channel. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the armed forces of Ukraine, glory to the Ukrainian Special Forces. This was Major of the Ukrainian Army, Taras Berezovets. Friends, until we meet again, goodbye.